Welcome, ladies and gentlemen of the press, and welcome all of you human beings. Over 200 years ago, a shout was heard round the world, and this shout was that all people are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Our forefathers penned those words and ignited a revolution. It was a revolution that was not only against the powers of the British Crown, but it was also a revolution against corporate power. Because our forefathers knew what corporate power could do and how it could plunder the coffers of we the people. The Boston Tea Party was an example of that. The Boston Tea Party was a revolt against the East Indies British Trading Company, because the Crown had granted them tax privileges that were denied we the people. There were many ships in that harbor that night, but only the East Indies Company was targeted for that revolt. Our forefathers knew the power of corporations because they had lived under the thumb of it, and they wanted to ensure in our Constitution that it was we the people that had the rights and not corporations. So they wrote a constitution to protect our human inalienable rights. Over the course of the next 200 years, those rights have been eroded, not by legislation, but by activist appointed judges who favored corporations over we the people. In the 1870s, the term corporate personhood was first penned and by activist judges was put into effect. Because of that, corporations had access to the protection of our Constitution that our forefathers intended only for natural-born human beings. And over the course of the next 100 years, activist judges continued to erode the rights of we the people, until finally culminating in the 2010 Supreme Court decision in Citizens United that granted corporations not only personhood, but granted them the right to free speech through the use of their monies. This decision catalyzed the nation, and because of that decision, the move to amend the Constitution to state that natural-born people are entitled to constitutional protection rights of our inalienable rights, and that corporations are not, and that they are not persons, and that money is not free speech. Since that time, there have been many voter initiatives across this country, and in every single one of those voter initiatives, the voters have plainly stated that corporations are not people and that money is not speech. This has been true in both progressive and conservative districts. People know the difference between an artificial entity and human beings. And because of that, the people are ready to take a stance against corporate personhood, and through this amendment, in corporate personhood and their free speech rights through money, through this constitutional amendment. And here are the responses to the candidate questionnaire that has been sent to all of the candidates in the district. The first question reads, "I will use my office to support the movement to amend the Constitution by passing resolutions." Positive responses came from Joe Ward, Brian McMahon, Joe Samqueen, Jane Hips, Thomas Hill. No responses came from Jack Debman. Other candidates declined to respond at this point in time. The next question was, "I will use my office to support the movement to amend the Constitution by proposing legislation." Positive responses came from Joe Ward, Brian McMahon, Joe Samqueen, Jane Hips, and Thomas Hill. Negative response from Jack Debman, and others failed to or declined to participate. The next question was, I will use my office to support the movement to amend the Constitution by publicly speaking about the need for this amendment. Positive responses came from Brian McMahon, Joe Samqueen, Jane Hips, Thomas Hill, and Joe Ward. A negative response from Jack Debman, and others declined to participate. The next question, I support amending the U.S. Constitution to make clear that corporations and other artificial entities do not have constitutional rights and that money is not speech, and campaign spending should be limited through legislation. Positive responses came from Brian McMahon, Joe Samqueen, Jane Hips, Thomas Hill, and Joe Ward. Negative response from Jack Debman. The last question was, how will you use your public office to end corporate constitutional rights and big money in politics? Brian McMahon responded, within the first 100 days in office, I will push the Board of County Commissioners to adopt a resolution against corporate personhood. I will work to promote and support any effort to protect the rights of the average citizen against corporate domination. Joe Samqueen responded, I will work together with those who wish to right this wrong. I will work for democratic processes that respect individual liberties, not just the power of big money. Jane Hips responded, as a state-level candidate, I fear that there is little of real value that I can do to affect issues at the national level. However, in North Carolina itself, we also have a problem with corporations and out-of-state interests playing too strong a role in our democratic politics. I pledge to make alterations to the laws at the state level that will reduce the ability of corporations or their PACs to give to political candidates. Last question, what is your position on the 2010 Supreme Court's Citizens United decision? Brian McMahon answered, with regards to the election process, the Citizens United decision is the single most detrimental act to limit the rights of the average voter since the first elections were held in this country. Within the influx of corporate money in massive quantities to campaign coffers, the voice of the average citizen has been silenced. With the election of corporate candidates, the face of the government in this nation will rapidly transition to one that promotes only those causes that benefit the wealthiest 1% and leaves the 99% only a distant memory. Joe Samqueen responded, corporations are not citizens or voters or individuals. Money is not speech. We need to protect individual liberty, equality, and justice from big money, period. Jane Hips responded, I think that the decision was partisan and mistaken. The definition of corporations as legal persons was intended to prevent seizure of private assets and to make starting a business easier, not to let corporations purchase legislatures. I believe the decision should be revisited and immediately overturned. Tom Hill simply answered, it is absurd. I couldn't agree more than with Tom Hill's response. At this point, we'll turn this over to Brian McMahon.
I'm proud to be here today to support Move to Amend. If you look at, we've already sort of heard a review of our history as to where our people have come from, being subject to the crown, being subject to land barons, to corporations, business entities, powerful men and women ruling over the common people and not allowing them to have a voice. And our ancestors left that kind of environment to come to this nation to try to seek a place where we could have democracy and where the people have a voice. All of our founding documents refer to the people. And yet we have seen this move in this country to try to restrict the power of the people, corporations gaining power, trying to have control over the process, to deny people the right to be able to speak, and that's wrong. I'm very much against it. I think it's an example. I run on a common sense platform. I am a candidate for office for the chairman of the Jackson County Board of Commissioners. And common sense control the rules and the regulations to make business more friendly for them and easier for them to make a profit. I'm not against capitalism. I'm not against allowing corporations to prosper in this nation and to employ individuals. But what I am against is those corporations trying to control the rulemaking process to make it more feasible for them to earn big salaries and not pass that on down to the common workers. You know, people, when we are born into this nation, the way that the U.S. Constitution is written, it grants every one of us the right, if we wanted to run for whether it be a local office or even the President of the United States, that everybody has an equal chance. But unfortunately, in today's society, with the introduction of vast amounts of money from corporations, it has almost become unattainable. That's why we so desperately need to overturn Citizens United. We need a constitutional amendment that limits the amount of money that's being put into these campaigns, and it says that corporations are not people.
Thank you, Brian. That concludes our press conference for today. We want to thank the press for being here, and we will be sending news releases to all of the news outlets.